Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Literacy View. Before we get started with our fabulous lineup of guests, Judy and I just want to share with you some exciting things that are going on with the Literacy View. First, we have Trivia Night on January 30th. You will need to register for that. So look for our link in our Facebook group, The Literacy View. It's going to be a lot of fun. We have Eric Foyer, who will be running the trivia event. His organization is called Trivia.117-AI. And then Judy and I are going to be presenting at 3 conferences in the next couple of months. We are going to be at Research Ed at the end of March 29th in New York City. And we're going to also be at Everyone Reading on March 3rd and March 4th, also in New York City. And then in April 7th to 9th, we will be presenting at the World Literacy Summit at Oxford University. Woo! So we are very excited, and we just wanted to share that with you, and I hope that we get a chance to see you. All right, so let's get into today's episode. We have 3 wonderful guests with us today. We have Phil Weinberg, Sherry Lewkowicz, and Dr. Steve Graham. Phil Weinberg is Senior Advisor and Managing Director at the Writing Pathway at Teaching Lab Studio. Phil was formerly the Deputy Chancellor for Teaching and Learning for the New York City Department of Education, the nation's largest school system. Sherry Lewkowicz is the Senior Director also with the Writing Pathway at Teaching Lab Studio. Sherry has over 15 years of experience crafting learning opportunities related to writing instruction. And last but not least, we have Dr. Steve Graham, and he is the research advisor for this project, and he is with Arizona State University. Dr. Graham is the Regent and Warner Professor in the Division of Leadership and Innovation at Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at Arizona State University. For more than 30 years, he has studied how writing develops, how to teach it effectively, and how writing can be used to support reading and learning. So let's get on with the show. All right, so we have an article that we're sharing with you, and the article is entitled Teaching Writing During the COVID-19 Pandemic in the 2021-2022 School Year. And you might be wondering, why are we talking about COVID and the pandemic? We want to get rid of that. But it has some major implications that we're going to discuss today. So I'm going to kick it off first with Dr. Steve Graham. Maybe you could share a little bit about the research, and then we could get into how that has been used by Writing Pathway, and our other guests can talk about that. All right, so why don't you kick it off for us?
Thank you very much. The reason this study came about is we had 2 goals. One is we wanted to have a sense of what teachers were doing in their classroom at the middle and high school level. Usually when that's studied, it's a survey that's given at the end of the year, and we ask teachers to reconstruct in their mind what they did. That's really difficult. The other way is that we observe teachers, and usually if that happens, you're observing them a couple of times throughout a year, and they know when you're coming. So you never know if you're quite getting what's going on there on a daily basis. And so we thought, if we're going to design something that teachers use at the middle and high school level, we need to have a sense of what's going on in classrooms. And so Phil and Sherry and other people at Quill, where they were at one time, and Ed Lab developed an app. And the way the app worked was it had 11 options on it. And each day we asked teachers to tell us what they were doing. And so they could quickly, if they were doing like a short writing assignment, they could click on that, and then it would take them down a little path, and they could say how much time they were spending on that and then say a little bit more about it. So it was real economical in terms of getting information. Now, that was also important to us because we needed, in the intervention study that we eventually, or two intervention studies we eventually did, we needed a way to figure out what teachers were doing when they were implementing the intervention that was developed, the pathway intervention by Phil and colleagues. And so here's what the basic findings of this study are. It's pretty straightforward. Initially, we had 109 teachers, middle and high school teachers, not quite evenly split, about 42% middle school, 58% high school. And we were in the third year of COVID at the time. And we thought, this would be interesting to look at to see if there's any differences 3 years out in COVID in terms of what teachers are doing in terms of online instruction, hybrid instruction, and in class. And 38 teachers were doing those three things. And so what we found was there was no difference whatsoever when teachers were hybrid, when they were online, or they in class in terms of teaching writing. The more important thing, I think, for us was that there was little difference between what middle school teachers and high school teachers did. The one exception to this is high school teachers taught grammar a little bit more. When we took a look at, what was going on, teachers responded about 70 times across the year. So we had quite a few data points on each teacher. What we found was that about 1 out of every 5 lessons, when they responded, they weren't doing anything with writing. For the other 80% of the lessons, they usually did one thing, and that was pretty much it. And it usually lasted somewhere around 20 minutes out of their time. And this was English teachers or mostly social studies teachers. And I think a way of thinking about this to make it really simple is that what they most often did when students wrote were short writing assignments, 2 paragraphs or less. Okay. When we took a look at what they taught, they were more likely to teach sentence construction skills. Didn't occur a ton of the time, but that was more likely to occur than teaching, say, transcription skills like spelling or typing or handwriting. And that's really not surprising given this is secondary teachers. And we also found that they spent more time focusing in on planning rather than revising in terms of teaching those skills. And so I think a way of thinking about this, if you looked at each of these activities, on average, they were spending about 3 to 5 minutes on average across, the 70 times they responded. So not a lot of time. But when they were actually engaged in that activity, it was about 20 minutes whenever that activity was occurring. So you can think about maybe a third to a little bit more of their class time focused in on writing.
So that's stunning. Not surprising, but stunning. And interesting, when I read over the article, those were the main points that I pulled out. So I guess my main idea skills are in check.
You don't need any instruction.
Right. I don't need any instruction.
Right, Faith, I know what you want. You want to cheers. Let's all give
Of course. Of course. Thank you. Okay. All right. So now that we have that, the research behind what we're going to be talking about tonight, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry and Phil to start talking about how they use this research. I think, Phil, you were part of the research study as well. If you could talk about how that is informing the work that you do now. It doesn't matter to me who starts, and then we'll bring my beautiful co-host in.
I can start, and then Phil's always very good at pointing out the things that I forgot. So I think we'll do it that way. And I did want to start by just saying thank you guys so much for having us, but more importantly for doing this podcast. I discovered it. I don't even know how I found it, but ever since I found it, I have been such a fan. I think the work you guys are doing is so important. I love that it is a conversation and not just a webinar. There's a ton of webinars out there. I do some of them and they're great, but to actually hear a real conversation with real questions and real answers and no bullshit, I think is really, really valuable in the work that we do. So I am a huge fan. I wanted to start with that. Okay. So as for the work that we did, so I think Steve did a great job of summarizing that first study. And as he said, the idea was we needed a way to fairly quickly and accurately get a sense of what teachers were doing with writing instruction on a daily basis. And so that was the goal there. And we, of course, got some interesting data too about what was happening, in COVID. The idea was then to take that survey and take it into an intervention study where we looked at if we developed a scope and sequence for teaching writing, a pathway, you might call it. And if we developed that with teachers in close collaboration with them and made it widely available, openly available, free, and the resources that go with it, could we then track what happened in classrooms where teachers were using that writing pathway and compare it to classrooms where they weren't. So I always mix up the years, for the 22-23 and 23-24 school years, we did studies both those years with schools across the country. And we are in the process of evaluating those results and applying for publication. But basically what we found, we like to focus the second year. We really refined the pathway. We did quite a bit of revision. And so what we found in the second year was with 441 middle school students, both in control and treatment, 21 different classrooms. We had significantly more growth in the pathway classrooms, about 9 times the growth, actually. And another way to think about it that Steve offered to us, which is very helpful, is to think of it as a 24 percentile gain. So if you think about a student who came in at the, let's say, 50th percentile, they would end at the end of the study at the 74th percentile. So pretty significant movement and an effect size of 0.64, which, if you know effect sizes, is a solid effect size, especially when it comes to writing. So we're really excited about those results. And they've driven a great deal of learning for us around the pathway. One of the things that's really important to us is working in close collaboration with teachers all along. So that has always continued. And it's grown and developed quite a bit. It started as a giant Google spreadsheet with lots of links. It is now a fully fledged website that anyone can access. It's writingpathway.org. And we've integrated, one of the big developments is we've integrated AI, that scary thing. But we hope we have leveraged it and integrated it in a really thoughtful and useful way for teachers. So yeah, I'll pause there. Phil, what did I leave out?
You didn't leave out anything, but I will talk a little bit about why we did the initial study and how we did the later study. So I spent 35 years working in the New York City school system. And so often what we see is people coming in with solutions for how people should teach, as opposed to people working with and observing in schools to see what's actually happening. So we wanted a chance to think about what 100 plus teachers did over the course of a year in terms of writing. And then we thought we might be able to use that information, their experience and their input for us, to build a bridge to what the best research says should be happening in terms of teaching writing. And so we had that first year study with a ton of information about what people were doing and not doing. We also had our own experience that helped inform what people aren't doing. And we know the answer for why people aren't doing as much writing as we want. It's time. And then we worked with the teachers who were part of the study. We laid out what the research said should be happening. And we started to build ways in which we could make it easier for teachers to do what the research says they should be doing. What normally happens in schools is something gets taken up and it has to be done better and it has to be done fast. It gets put on the shoulders of teachers, which really isn't fair. And it's not like we build in, sadly, in this profession, time for teachers to learn. That would be this. If we were blowing up schools and starting all over again, this is the first thing I think we should put in there: time for professionals to hone their craft. We wanted to make sure we heard from teachers. That's nice. We wanted to make sure we heard from teachers.
You're getting big cheers. Maybe.
This is the educators in our classrooms are the ones who need the big chairs, who deserve the big chairs. And we were lucky to have a bunch of people who were willing to talk to us about what they were doing and what they weren't doing, and be honest with us and help us craft this first gigantic Google spreadsheet with links that we asked people to test in their classrooms, which was an onerous task because it wasn't an easy thing to work with. But we had a whole bunch of teachers who were willing to try to do that with us. The study itself, both years of the study, involved a control group of teachers and a treatment group of teachers. And really the study was as simple as everybody gave a beginning of the year essay to their students and an end of the year essay to their students. The data was sent to a scoring center, and then it was sent to Steve. And what we really wanted to know is, what if we wanted to ask ourselves, is what we're building good for young people? And we had a very, very good year. The first year we had a small effect size, and a very strong year the following year as we refined the pathway. My belief is the strong year partly had to do with time. We were able to speed up teachers' ability to access the information on the pathway and implement it because of our move to a fully functional website and our move to creating more AI ability for teachers to develop classroom materials.
So this is really cutting edge. And Judy and I have had lots of conversations about AI, the benefits of it, the challenges of it. Judy, why don't you jump in, ask those questions or whatever you want to talk about at this point. I have so many things going on in my head, but I want to hear from you.
You know, about a month ago, I started thinking a little bit more about AI. And I know when I initially thought about it, I felt guilty, I felt dirty, I felt like I wasn't going to be good enough. And then all of a sudden, I just downloaded, you know, ChatGPT, the app, the not, you know, like the real version of it. And I was just like blown away. I was like, wow, this is a game changer. And this could be so helpful for the teachers that I support. What I'm learning with AI is, though, you still need to put thought into it, right? You have to know content, you have to know pedagogy, you have to know how to prompt it well. Because I'll be honest, I've seen teachers use it poorly, and that could be very embarrassing. You know, it's not a substitute for a lesson plan that you didn't plan and didn't put effort into. But I think if you learn to really know your content, but wanted to enhance what you're doing, it can be a game changer. You know, for a while I was thinking, you know, we have such a crisis in education. Teachers are totally overburdened. They're exhausted. They're doing too much. And one of the solutions that I thought of, but nobody else seems to be on board with it, is I personally, if I was a principal, which I have no plans of being, I would probably departmentalize starting in first grade. This is your English teacher. This is your math teacher. And then the kids don't shift classrooms, but the teachers shift classrooms. There's no evidence, and I don't think there's any research to support that that would be a bad idea. But that idea doesn't seem to be taking off. So I think it's a really important thing to think about. How can we lessen the burden of teachers, but also enhance our instruction? And I think that embracing AI tools can be a game changer. My biggest concern that I'm seeing, though, and I know you guys mentioned it, is time. For some reason, schools, even at the elementary level, which is my area of expertise, for some reason, there's never enough time or not enough attention towards writing instruction. And it kind of, I don't know if I should use the word, but it kind of pisses me off. And then the other thing that really bothers me is that a lot of the publishers that are coming out with writing instruction, it's been so poorly developed, almost like they just wanted to slap something together during COVID, throw it into the classrooms, and you know, people think that everything's evidence and research based, and it's really not. And it's concerning, and it's kind of heartbreaking, because more and more I'm seeing teachers tell me they don't enjoy writing instruction, they don't know how to do it well. And I think it comes back to what Phil said before, that we need to give teachers the right tools and the right training, because if we don't, we're going to have a generation of kids that doesn't write well, doesn't enjoy writing, and teachers that are not invested in teaching students how to write well. And it's really concerning, because a lot of kids are struggling with reading. A lot of kids are, in essence, struggling with the pillar of writing, which is even more complex. And I see that many people are just saying, okay, let's just use assistive technology where kids are just using voice to text, and that has a purpose, but let's not diminish the value of teaching kids the craft of writing.
So
Let's
I'm
not be
gonna
afraid of that.
so I'm gonna jump in, Steve. In listening to Judy, that she said a lot right there as far
Yeah.
as really about how teachers can develop their own skills because maybe they don't have the confidence to be able to teach writing well. That's number one. Two, the time element is a major factor because the more you give, the more you have to mark. And so perhaps that's one of the reasons why they give short answer type writing. Number three, there's just not enough hours in the day to do everything well. And as Judy said, they're given, programs where they throw in the kitchen sink, and then the teachers are left to have to figure out what to do. So, from your point of view, as somebody who teaches uh, college students and you've done research in this area for so many years, what are some of your suggestions?
Well, I think one of the things is it's important that we change our mindset around writing and what its effects are. So, if you take a look at, say, the last 20, 30 years in the US, we've had these reform efforts going on, and they've centered around reading, and reading is critically important, no doubt about it, and it should be focused on. We focus on science and math, they're critical. What we've often done, though, in terms of making those choices, is we haven't brought to bear our full expertise that we have as teachers in terms of how we can make reading instruction more effective and learning more effective in the content areas. So what do I mean by that? So if you take a look at reading, we focused in on the big five, reading comprehension, vocabulary, phonics, reading fluency, and for younger kids, phonological awareness. And, that comes out of the National Institute of Child Human and Health Development report, the National Reading Panel. They only looked at a set of things that might improve reading. Writing, if they would have included, would have been the sixth pillar. So there's a lot of evidence that suggests when you write, the more you write, the better your reading comprehension. When you write about what you read, your comprehension goes up. When you teach writing, your reading performance goes up, your abilities in reading, and it goes the other way. There's also evidence that suggests that when you combine reading and writing instruction, put an equal amount of time or close to an equal amount of time on them, you get better as readers and writers. And when kids write about what they're learning, they do better in math, social studies, and science, about an equal effect. So I think one of the things that is important, and it's a place where I think academics like me have not done a good job, is helping the public know and helping teachers know why it's important, not just for writing, but for learning in schools and being a better reader, that writing is part of this reform effort. So I'll leave it at that. That if we had that mindset, time is still going to be an issue, but we might find a way to make more time for writing to happen across the school days and within different disciplines.
So I was a regional reading coach during the Reading First time. And just what you're saying, Steve, we were taught about the five pillars, and writing was not really there. And we were even told when we would go to our meetings in Albany, and we would have to bring this back to school districts, that we were to really focus on the big five. And writing was not really there. And honestly, it is BS. A lot of teachers were calling BS that writing really needed to be there, and it wasn't. So let's talk a little bit about this app and AI, because that is fascinating to us. How then are teachers reacting to this? I'm sure at first they must have been hesitant, and maybe when they saw the improvements, maybe you won them over. I'm really curious to know about that. Like, was it well received at the beginning, or did it take some time? And what did you do to help facilitate that? Doesn't matter to me who jumps in.
Is it okay? I'll take this one. Great questions and great and Judy, I wrote down furiously notes when you were speaking. So there are so many things. So I'll start with the AI, and then maybe I can touch on some of the other things. I think there is a lot of fear and anxiety around AI, and I think it's not misplaced. I think it makes sense, and I think we do have a lot to be really cautious about, especially in terms of bringing it in to students and into the classroom. That said, I think something that's really important to us is that the way that we've been leveraging AI is to enhance what teachers are doing and to make it easier. We keep talking about time. We know we were classroom teachers. There is not extra time. There is no more time. And so we were really interested, and we've been really interested all along, in how do we support teachers in doing these things that we know are evidence-based and we know will work in a way that's easier and less of a lift for them. In past roles, like I've worked on helping teachers learn these strategies, and I had to deal with the fact that I was asking them to do something that was a heavy lift. I was asking them to take these strategies and take these approaches, go back to their content, embed these strategies into their content. Judy, you mentioned there's a lot of movement right now around curriculum and knowledge building, and all of that is mostly very positive. But unfortunately, writing is often, as you very rightly said, and we hear this over and over from teachers, that writing is either not incorporated, or when it is, it's just not thoughtfully done, not carefully done. It's not integrated. It's this extra thing that, of course, is the first thing to get cut when there isn't time, right? So our thinking was, how can we support teachers with writing in a way that it makes it easier for them? So to go back to the AI, and I wish, I know this is a podcast, so I didn't think about demoing, but I think it's something that really helps to see it. So I encourage everyone to go to the site and just try the AI generator. What it does is you tell it what skill you want to work on. So for example, if it is at the sentence level, let's say you want to work on students writing summaries, single sentence summaries about what they've read, which I'm sure Steve will tell you is one of the things we know really, really works with both reading comprehension and writing. So you want to do a summary sentence skill. Well, instead of you having to then go and say, okay, I'm teaching A Long Walk to Water, we just read chapter 5, and let me create an activity around that and what I expect students to write so that I can evaluate what they write. You can go to the pathway and you can create that activity literally in seconds. It's crazy. It still blows me away. And it will be, not only will you create it in seconds, but as opposed to going to ChatGPT, Judy, as you were mentioning, right? On the back end, we have taught the pathway, is one way to think of it. We've taught the AI that these are the things you need to make sure you do. This is how it should be formatted. These are the skills you want to address. There's all this kind of education of the AI that's happened on the back end that teachers don't even see, to make sure that what's produced is of high quality. And it's not perfect. Thank you. It's not perfect. We do think it's really important that teachers read what it outputs. There are these hallucinations. There are those things. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And it's a lot better than nothing, which is what most teachers have. So yeah, that's I'll stop there.
Yeah. And we want to make sure we learn how to use AI well, rather than have AI use us, as it were. We created a teacher-facing tool, not a student-facing tool. And the way it's supposed to be used, the output is only for the teacher, who can edit it, change it, cut it in half, use it however they want. But we want a teacher's eyes to be on it. That's time, but they didn't have to create the materials. And so we're saving them time. And our hope is that we can create a kind of transaction for the teacher where, if they're willing to take a look at a way that they might want to do a check for understanding at the beginning of a lesson by looking for words that, transitions around effect. They'll do this. It'll take them 3 minutes to put in less than 3 minutes to put in, I'm teaching The Great Gatsby tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. I have something all my students can use very quickly at the beginning of the period. I can take a quick look at it, get a pulse of where the class is. And we've done authentic writing work creating, we hope, or helping students become more sophisticated writers, which really, and this is where I think Sherry and I and Steve, where our heart really is, that's more sophisticated thinkers. And I think that the ignoring of writing, which is what happens in schools, is tragic because it's ignoring our obligation to help students become better critical thinkers. And I think we're in a pickle because writing isn't taught well because teachers aren't taught how to teach writing. Writing isn't taught well because it's not assessed. But writing is how students are assessed all the time. So really good teachers end up teaching students to write poorly so that they can pass an assessment. Because getting a grade in New York State, it would be on a Regents, is more important than having a student have to struggle with graduation. And so good-hearted people are not serving their students as well as they might because the system pressures them not to serve their students as well as they might. We want to create it, make it at least a little bit easier for someone to do quality writing work in the hopes that eventually, following the work that Steve has done, there'll be a real mindset change around how important writing is for students' overall learning and for creating a society of young people who think critically and can advocate for themselves.
Wow. You just said that so well. I mean, everything you were saying, I'm thinking, yes, yes, yes. Having been in the school system, you just hit the nail on the head. Judy, as far as writing instruction goes.
Did you just say yes, yes, yes?
Yes, yes, yes.
Not on Phil. This is your lucky day. Faith doesn't say yes, yes, yes 3 times in a row to a lot of people. Cheers. Cheers.
So Judy,
Yeah.
as far as working with teachers in the younger grades, are there any implications from this work that you could see that could be carried over to teachers K-2? Because, we know they need to work on transcription skills. As Dr. Graham said, by the time they're in high school, they're not really paying attention to spelling or just the actual act of writing. They're just not really doing that, even though there are kids we know who could use that. But certainly K-2, I'm thinking this type of work definitely could have some real interesting implications. What do you think?
I think it definitely could. I'm hoping that you guys create some resources for the K-5 bracket as well. I hope, is that on the horizon for you guys?
So the current pathway, we say it's aimed at grades 3 and up. You
Okay.
could use it with younger grades. There's no reason you couldn't. We're a little cautious, I think, about getting too much in the way of the reading instruction and what's happening there. And our background also tends to be more, we were both high school teachers, so we're more familiar with the research there and all of that, but it certainly could be used and adapted.
I think K-2 teachers right now are desperate for it. We want to move away from just doing, sentence dictation that we're doing in phonics instruction, which is, it has a value, but it's hard to kind of say it, but I definitely think that the balanced literacy days had a lot of issues, right? I don't know how many of you know, I was formerly reading recovery trained, and now for the last 8 or 9 years, I've been in the structured literacy world. The only thing I have to say is I saw more writing during the balanced literacy days. Now, was it explicit and structured? It wasn't, but I definitely saw kids writing more. I saw definitely more celebrations of writing instruction. And right now, I think that, as we're shifting in terms of structured literacy, I do see many good things. I mean, I think I see a lot of great things from Karen Harris and Leslie Lord and Think SRSD, but I don't see it enough in the classrooms. And I think that, there's such a hyper focus now on teaching kids to crack the code, but I don't see as much systematic, structured literacy instruction going on as I would like to see. And it is really concerning to me. And, let's be honest, Lucy's program had a lot of flaws. I mean, it wasn't structured, it wasn't explicit enough, but kids were writing. There was more celebration. And I think that those were positive things. And I think that we have to bring elements of structure, highlighting, showing how to write a good topic set, and showing how to write a conclusion, showing how to plan your writing and take those elements of planning and transfer it, and celebrating writing and celebrating what's working and what's not working and sharing. And I don't see it, and I find it to be really concerning, and it's kind of freaking me out a little bit because it's not just about the state test. It's not just being able to write a short response because I have to get a level 3 or a level 4 in New York City or wherever you are. It's really about being able to be a critical thinker and being able to express yourself. And, I don't want kids to just go on, AI to write their resume. They need to know how to do these things on their own. They need to put thought into it and become functioning members of society that are passionate and expressing themselves well. So I definitely would like to hear your opinions because I am concerned as we've moved into the structured literacy world. I don't think that classrooms are where they should be at in terms of writing. Maybe they are, Faith. I don't know. You're in the schools too. Tell me what you're thinking, everybody.
Well, you just said before, I don't know if you realize, you mentioned Lucy, and we didn't drink to Lucy. I don't have my mug today, but I'll hold up. And
Faith gets silly. She has this Lucy drinking game that she came up with.
All right. You asked me what I'm thinking.
Yeah. What are you thinking, Faith?
I honestly, after reading this research, I was nodding my head saying, yep, short answers, not a whole lot of writing, more emphasis on planning, not enough on revision. That's exactly what I see. So this article made complete sense to me as I was looking it over. It's just what I see. But
so what are we going to do?
Well, we have the experts here, and I want to really focus on this whole idea of having an app. The research told us teachers, even before the pandemic, were spending very little time on writing instruction, that it basically seemed very similar across the board, whether they were in school, out of school, they were still getting very little writing instruction. So now with this app, you saw an increase in writing and I guess producing better results. So how do we spread this around? I mean, Phil, you were part of the New York City school system, the largest school system. I mean, there are so many kids out there who really need this type of instruction. How do we build up teachers and their confidence? Because I could tell you, having been in lots of schools, teachers do not feel confident, one, to teach writing, and two, in their own abilities to write well. So I know I threw out a lot there, but we could start with Steve first, and then we'll work our way around. What are some of your thoughts about this?
Well, I'd like to share one thing in response to some of the earlier conversation that you guys were having cross from each other. So we've just finished 2 really large meta-analysis, one at the elementary level and one at the secondary level, taking a look at which kinds of writing treatments are effective. And one of the things that we find, and I hate to say this, but we found that increasing the amount of time that students write at either the elementary level or the secondary level doesn't make a difference in their growth as writers. Now, that doesn't sound good, right? But on the other hand, 75% of the studies we looked at, which did have a positive effect on writing, involved students writing while learning their craft. So you mentioned Karen Harris earlier, who invented self-regulated strategy development. And out of due diligence, I need to mention she's my wife. there's a lot of writing going on when you do SRSD, but you're learning how to plan and draft and revise and monitor and regulate the writing process at the same time. And so what we need more of is we want kids to write, but it needs to be for particular purposes. It's either about learning, it's about helping you read better, or it's about writing and developing the skills that you need to be successful. So I think that's one of the things that's particularly important. That doesn't go directly to your question, but I wanted to point that out. And I think the structured literacy issue that you're bringing up is that I would see it as more of a scientific, the SOR, science of reading kind of thing, where that's kind of crowded out any attention to anything else in literacy. I favor explicit instruction and I favor structured instruction, but it needs to be more balanced in terms of thinking about the science of literacy and the science of learning. So I'll leave it there and let Phil and Sherry kind of respond to the how do we make this more available.
I just want to say you're not the only person who came on this show and said this. Judy, isn't this exactly what Tim Rosinski said? That basically phonics sucked the oxygen out of the room and there was no room left for fluency. So I feel like that's making me think about that. But I'll turn it over to Sherry and Phil right now.
I mean, I don't have anything specific to add. I think this is a problem we have in general in education is that, and I think some of it is understandable. It's a huge profession. It's a huge endeavor. There's a ton of people to educate and a ton of teachers. And so we get excited about the new thing, the new problem. And, these days it's reading and then we switch to a new one and we often lose sight, I think, of the whole and the fact that all of these things work together. It's not one that, the strands, right? There's not one strand that on its own. We can't just teach vocabulary, just build knowledge. We have to do all these things, which is overwhelming because there's only so much time in the day. But I think that's why, as much as we can, we need to look towards approaches that make that integration, that's part of the deal, right? Is that we're not having a time for writing and a time for reading and a time for vocabulary, that these things are integrated. And I do think a big part of that is teacher knowledge, is that teachers have the awareness and understanding of these things to be able to weave those things together because it is sophisticated, it is complex. And so if you're just handed a lesson plan, handed a curriculum, and you don't have any understanding of what that looks like and how that gets integrated, I think it's really hard to do it, in a fluid way that maximizes the limited time we have.
I wish I had my mug because cheers to you, Sherry. And exactly, really. Phil?
Well, and we also have to own that there are very, very specific messages sent to the leaders of school systems, the leaders of schools, and teachers around what we value and what we should spend our time on. And what we say we value and then end, which doesn't include writing, is a very clear message to teachers. And what is measured is not writing. What is measured very, very sadly, even more sadly than that we don't measure writing or we don't look at writing, is thinking. We measure answers. And it's a problem in our political world. It's a problem in our school system. To try to gather data on whether students write well is difficult. To gather data on whether students are progressing as thinkers is even more difficult. But if it's what we believe we should be doing in our schools, I think we have to start to move toward ways in which we can do it. Steve's research points to lots of ways in which we can implement practices that help students become better thinkers because they become better writers. We're trying to do a small part of that. We're trying to make it easy for teachers to implement more writing in their instruction without having to spend a ton more time planning because they don't have that time. And so the simplest thing we can do to start is to just say the work we've created is out there, it's online, anybody can use it. If you have an email address, you can use it. And if you play around with it, you might save yourself some time and help your students start to practice to become better writers, better thinkers.
I I was just going to add one thing, which is, this idea of, we were talking earlier about AI and teaching students to write. I think this idea of writing is thinking makes this question about, do we still need to teach writing, irrelevant? I've been getting this question a lot, and I'm sure Steve gets it a lot. Why do we need to teach kids how to write or how to plan or how to do any of this when AI can do it for them? And I think as soon as you think of writing as thinking, that question's ridiculous, right? If we're using writing to think and to discover what we know and to discover what we think about what we've read and what we're learning, then of course we need to do it ourselves. You can't farm that out. And I do think there's a place for interacting with AI in writing for sure, but certainly with your youngest learners, you want them to have that foundation first before they're interacting with an AI and not doing it themselves. So just what Phil was saying struck me. And I think also, Phil's point about how we assess, it drives so much, right? So much of the landscape in education has to do with what is assessed, what's measured gets done. And so having more richer ways of assessing students' learning than what we have now, I think is something that would help a lot.
Judy, as I'm listening to this about, thinking, that writing is thinking, we've been talking about this knowledge building movement. And I think that people assume, well, you get this curriculum and it's all knowledge building, and that kind of does the heavy lifting. But what I think you and I know is it's way more than just putting this curriculum in a classroom. And I don't care which program it is, it doesn't really make a difference, that if we don't give attention to and enough time to writing, what are they going to get out of it? What are your thoughts about that?
So I think that we definitely have to start giving writing the attention it deserves, but I also think that we have to start thinking about, what do we have in those classrooms? Is it working? Is it working to the best of its ability? So let me ask you guys something. So the app that you developed can be used in conjunction with any core program? But see, that's what I'm not seeing happening enough. Like even like Think SRSD or SRSD or other things, I just don't see it happen. And I see this over attachment to the writing revolution, which I don't even think has as much evidence and research behind it. It's like, how do we make sure that, these things are available, but how do we actually have them used in the classrooms? And also, what do we do with, curriculums or programs that might have not designed very strong writing programs? It's very hard to untangle something that wasn't well designed and then figure out how to make it function well. It's like, if something's broken, how do you make it work well? And also, my other question is your app designed in a way that it's aligned with the science of reading? And does it also go through the entire writing process? Because I see a lot of principals requesting, they want to see evidence of a writing process. They don't want to just see like kids, oh, today I wrote a sentence, tomorrow I wrote another sentence that's not related. I know that might have not been exactly what Faith asked, but these are the things that I'm seeing in the field, and I would love help with how to navigate, because I think a lot of teachers, like I said, are really frustrated, because I think what ended up happening is, at least in New York City and in many other states, schools were told, that's it, laws are changing. Schools quickly had to adopt programs, and nobody really had a lot of time to decide whether they were the best in terms of pedagogy. So like, how do we like navigate? It's not easy.
Anybody could jump in.
So, I think we want to make sure that we honor the key job in young people's education that teachers have. There's this material, and then there's these students. The teacher has to mediate between the material and the students. Our hope with the resource that we've created is that it will make it easier and quicker for a teacher to take a look at who their class is and where they are, and find the right things to put in front of their young people the next day to move them the next step. Because in many ways, it's only the teacher who can know what that next step is for this particular class. Now, the ideal implementation for young people would be a school-wide implementation of a coherent writing program. Frankly, even the worst writing program, whatever that is, if it was done coherently, would probably make a positive difference for young people. But you asked whether we have a clear sort of outline of the full writing process. It is online in our program there. And a teacher can choose to implement whatever part of it they think their young people need. Our next goal is to create a tool that allows teachers to give formative assessments to their students and have the formative assessment point them back toward the pathway to think about what's the optimal place to jump into the pathway. But what we want is a coherent. As a principal, I used to follow students around during the day, and I worked in a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful school with wonderful, wonderful, wonderful teachers. And I'd follow a student and I'd get confused about how we were supposed to teach writing in our school with teachers who were great, who liked each other, who spent time talking to each other, but still everybody had their own way of teaching writing. I think that if we can start to recognize the key role that writing has in helping our students become better thinkers and value it as part of how we as an institution, whether that be a department in a school, a grade level team in a school, an entire school, or ideally an entire school district, since students move around, if we can create a coherent pathway to what we believe, what we name, what we're willing to say we value is good writing, and build that into young people's experiences, I think we can start to turn the tide around the lack of attention that writing's being given.
So to wrap up, I just want to make sure that we're all clear, that we're leaving people with the message that you want to impart, that there is now a tool that is available that can make a teacher's job easier and to encourage writing instruction, because they don't have to sweat over some of the other things that maybe stop them from actually teaching writing. Is that correct? Yes. Okay.
I think that was an excellent summary. And I would just add, Judy, to your question, and Phil did mention it, but the writing pathway does not stop at sentences. It goes well beyond that. We cover all, the three major genres: informational writing, persuasive and argumentative, and narrative. And I think that you'll discover, if you explore the pathway, what it does is it really scaffolds and breaks down the process of writing each of those kinds of writing, making sure students understand the structure of those kinds of writing, see models of that kind of writing. That's something that we learned a lot from Dr. Graham's
Does it have a lot of exemplars?
Yes. So every unit beyond the sentence begins with an exemplar text. That is where every single module beyond the sentence begins, because we can't expect kids to write something if they don't know what it's supposed to look like. But those exemplars need to be at a level that they can understand and interact with. So the exemplars are created on grade level, which I think is really helpful too.
That's good. One last question.
Is there training available in how to navigate this? Because I'm sure that for some people, this could be overwhelming, just the thought of using an app.
Sure.
If you're not used to doing that. So there is training.
For sure. So I think we've done maybe too good of a job of making, and it's a website, not an app, so you can access it from any browser. Definitely better on the computer than on the phone, I will say. But I think our designers and engineers have honestly done such a good job of making it so easy to use that you really don't need very much training at all to actually use it. what I think, where the training I think is important and the education is important, is understanding what is best practice in writing instruction. What does quality writing instruction include, and what does it look like? There is a lot, I think, to be done there. We are very lucky to be part of an organization, Teaching Lab, which is a nonprofit focused on supporting teachers with high quality instructional materials and with instruction. So through Teaching Lab, we do offer support for that professional learning piece, but it's not so much focused on how to use this tool, which unfortunately I think sometimes there's too much of that. PD around, here's how you use this tool, good luck, see ya, and not enough around building teachers' capacity and knowledge around what that tool might be helping them to do.
Also help with the gradual release. That's a big one that principals are looking for. That's all they talk about right now. And unfortunately, a lot of the programs that have been implemented in the school systems don't clearly lay out the gradual release, and teachers are still struggling with that sometimes.
Why don't you explain what that even means, Judy? Because I'm sure there are people listening that don't even know what you're talking about with gradual release.
Oh my God, Faith, you're quizzing me. She's getting me ready for trivia night, January 30th. All right, the gradual release, everybody, is the I do, the we do, the you do. It's your explicit model. And some of these programs, teachers are being rated and told that they have to show evidence of the gradual release, but then they're being given curriculum that doesn't outline it. And now they're struggling again because now they have to go home and they have to think of a task. And then a teacher's being told, and you have to differentiate, and you have to provide different scaffolds so that everybody has access to the same task.
And this is why there is a shortage in teaching, because it's an impossible job when you really listen.
And you know what? And the sad thing is, very often teachers, unfortunately, aren't celebrated. They're very often told, you're not good enough, or you didn't do a good enough job, or you could have done better, or this kid didn't succeed, and it's your fault. So does your tool help with navigating through the gradual release, scaffolding, and differentiation? I know that the show was wrapping up, but then I got a little hyper again. Sorry.
I mean, what's easy is the answer is yes to all three of those. That's an easy, straightforward yes. I think if you check out the tool, you'll see that that's gradual release is absolutely integrated.
Oh, one last question. Can you take a picture of a lesson plan in a program, put it into your thing, and then get a redesign or a better outcome?
So we don't support straight images just yet, but we do support PDFs. So if there's any kind of PDF, you can upload that, and the AI will pull from that. And we're working on the images. So the helping, yeah. So I think gradual release and differentiation is very much integrated throughout. Those are things that we are obviously think are really, really important. So lots of, and again, there is this emphasis on models too. I think that's one of the things you'll see kind of unique to this approach is a lot of emphasis on models. Something that I heard from Dr. Graham's wife, Dr. Harris, recently was the value of non-models too, like having kids look at examples that are not so strong and talk about that. And I was like,
Sherry, you're getting a cheers. All right, now I have to mess with all of you guys a little bit. All right, we got to keep it fun on the Literacy View. So tell me, guys, when you get into the car and you turn on your radio, what's on your radio? Boom, Sherry first. Go fast.
Oh my God, I don't have a car and I don't have a radio.
All right, Phil, next. Phil, you get in your car, you turn on the radio. What's going on over there?
It's WBGO from Newark.
Wow, what's that all about?
It's a jazz station.
Nice. All right, Steve, when you turn on the radio, what's going on over there?
Oh,
Steve,
you're muted.
Steve,
you're muted.
Steve, you're muted.
Maybe he's doing it on purpose. maybe he's thinking, what is this lady talking about now?
There he is.
I'm not sure. Oh, okay. Maybe you can hear me now. Rock and roll and rhythm and blues.
Nice. All right, one more. Ready? Are you ready? You think you guys can handle it?
You didn't ask me.
Oh, Faith, what do you turn on? I know. Wait, you know what I learned, guys? I'm going to share a secret from another podcast. We had Tim Shanahan on, and we just found out that he was a Swiftie. Isn't that awesome? Faith, so when you turn on the radio, what's going on over there?
I'm listening to disco.
Wow.
Nice. Wow, Faith stuck in the 70s or 80s. All right. All right. One more for fun. All right. All right. I want a non-conventional New Year's resolution that you have, not the typical. Any New Year's resolutions going on over here?
Not to make a New Year's resolution.
Anybody else?
One. Not to share my New Year's resolution.
Wow. Wow.
It's gotten me in trouble.
Phil, anything good going on over there for the new year?
I just forgot to make resolutions. So.
Good for you. What about you, Faith?
Well, then they can't be broken. If you don't make them, you can't break them. So
Wait, Faith, I'm going to say mine. I listened to Mel Robbins and she told me two things that I'm trying to implement. Get up in the morning, drink a cup of water before you drink anything else, and give yourself a high five when you look in the mirror. Start off your day a little bit more positive. I'm trying. I feel weird when I do it, but I'm trying. So maybe I inspired somebody for tomorrow. All right. So are we wrapping up, Faith? What's going on?
we're wrapping up. We're wrapping up. I want to thank our wonderful guests for sharing about writing, about what's happening with AI. And just to leave everybody with last thoughts, it is, I just want to make sure I have it correct. It's called The Writing Pathway at Teaching Lab Studio. I encourage everybody to check it out. We're going to put that link in the show notes along with the information about our wonderful guests. So thank you so much for joining us. Judy, any last words?
Right now, Facebook group, Real Teachers Letting Loose, the Literacy View. Also, join our website. Visit it, theliteracyview.com. And we're changing lives one view at a time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.